Get it. Alright. Hi guys, my name is Alana. Today I'll be talking to you about a video game called Gears of War. Shit. Audience.
Hi.
Back to a focus. Alright. So, what if I told you that the monster you just chainsawed in half used to be somebody's kid? It's not a hypothetical, and it's not a twist I made up for effect. It's canon. For years, players spent entire campaigns gunning down an enemy called the Locust without knowing where they actually came from. When the truth finally came out, it turned Gears of War from a game about shooting monsters into a game about what happens when people in power decide certain lives are expendable. Gears of War is one of the most influential shooter franchises in gaming history, built on a surprisingly emotional story about war, sacrifice, and monsters that used to be human. Today, I'm going to inform you about three things. First, the origins of the Locust and the war on planet Sera. Second, the major characters and the roles that they play in the story. And then finally, the legacy and evolution of the series since it first launched in 2006. Let's start with where it all began. Long before players ever fought the Locust, the humans of Sera were already at war with each other. The Pendulum Wars were fought over control of emulsion, which was a valuable natural energy resource buried underground. GameSpot on October 1st, 2019 reports that the true origin of the Locust was eventually revealed to be far darker than players first assumed. The Locusts were created through secret government experiments on children. Kids suffering from a mining disease called rust lung were taken to a facility called New Hope, where scientists fused their cells with the DNA of underground creatures, hoping that that would cure the disease. Instead, the experiments produced the first Locust, and one of those children grew up to become Queen Myra, who eventually became the leader of the entire horde. That backstory didn't come out of nowhere. Karen Travis's novel, Gears of War: Aspo Fields, published by Del Rey in 2008, expands on the human side of this history, which explores Marcus Phoenix and Don Santiago's services during the Pendulum Wars, years before the Locust ever surfaced. It shows that Sera was already a broken, war-torn planet before Emergence Day ever happened. Emergence Day was when the Locust finally launched a coordinated underground invasion that wiped out a quarter of the population in just a single day. Alright, now that we have gone over where the Locust came from, let's take a look at the people who had to fight them. Okay. The story of Gears of War is really carried by its characters. Marcus Phoenix leads what we have called the Delta Squad as a disgraced war hero pulled out of military prison to fight a war he once refused to fight. Official Xbox Magazine, November 7th, 2008, describes Marcus in Gears of War 2 as a battle-hardened leader whose gruff exterior just barely covers a soldier still wrestling with grief and loss. Beside him is Dominic Santiago, his best friend who broke him out of prison, and spends the trilogy desperately searching for his missing wife, Maria. Dom's storyline is, in fact, the emotional core of the original games, and it is the one that hit me hardest as a kid when I would watch my father play it. Alright. Marcus's cultural impact goes beyond the games themselves. Game Informer on December 3rd, 2010 reports that in a reader poll of nearly 70,000 votes, Marcus Fenix was ranked the 10th best video game character of the entire decade. Rounding out Delta Squad are Augustus Coltrane Cole, a former pro thrasherball player whose energy balances out the squad's grimness, and Damon Baird, the squad's sharp-tongued technical expert. Alright, together, this mismatched team is what turns Gears of War from a simple shooter into a story about brotherhood under pressure. Alright. After examining the characters who carried the story, we can now explore how the entire franchise has grown since it first launched. When Gears of War was released in 2006, it didn't just succeed, it reshaped its own studio. Wired, in April 2006, explains that Epic Games shifted its entire business model around this time, moving away from the PC-only development and betting heavily on the console exclusives. A gamble. It was a gamble. But Gears of War's success helped prove correct. The game popularized the cover shooter genre, a style of gameplay built around ducking behind obstacles and tactically pushing forward, which influenced countless third-person shooters that came after it. The series kept expanding for nearly 2 more decades. Polygon on May 5th, 2016 reports that Gears of War 4 was estimated to cost over $100 million to develop. A budget so large that could have threatened Epic Games financially, which is part of why Microsoft ultimately purchased the franchise outright in 2014. Since then, the series has continued with Gears 5, my favorite, in 2019, and an upcoming prequel. So excited. Gears of War, E-Day. Proving that nearly 20 years later, players are still finding their way back to Sierra. So, to bring it all together, we looked at the disturbingly true origins of the Locust and the war that shaped an entire planet, as well as the characters whose bonds and losses carried the story forward, and the legacy of a franchise that changed its own studio and an entire genre of gaming. Gears of War is one of the most influential shooter franchises in gaming history, built on, you guessed it, surprisingly emotional story about war, sacrifice, and monsters that used to be human. I actually watched most of my first Gears campaign from the couch instead of playing it myself, because the fights just felt just too intense for me to handle solo. I would watch my father play it. And then learning the real story behind the Locust years later made every one of those fights hit even harder. So that is why I love this game, and I hope you guys enjoyed the speech. If you have any questions. Okay, thank you guys.